All right. Well, welcome everyone to this amazing AMA SEO panel we have. I'm going to go ahead, just jump straight into it. I know we typically do some icebreakers, but there's so much to cover. There's an amazing panel of expertise that I actually want to ask tons of questions to. I'm sure the audience does as well. So I'm going to introduce our amazing panelists, and then I'll kick us off with, a discussion on if what's going on with SEO. First off, we have Dr. Marie Haynes. She is a recognized leader in the SEO industry since 2008. Today, Marie is known for understanding how Google search algorithms work, sharing in lay people's terms how business owners can improve their websites. Marie writes for Search Engine Land and is often featured in authoritative SEO publications, also has written several books. Next up, we have Jeannie Hill. Jeannie is a digital marketing director and semantic SEO expert focused on the healthcare market with over 20 years of experience leading businesses in up-to-date digital marketing strategies through understanding core update changes, technology demands, search trends, and consumer preferences. Having started with schema.org at its inception, Jeannie offers experience structured data and semantic SEO consultations. Next up, we have Ryan Robinson, the co-founder of Right to Blogger, a suite of over 80 powerful tools for content creators. He's also a blogger, serial founder, recovering side project addict that teaches 500,000 monthly readers on how to grow a meaningful online business at ryrob.com. And last but not least, we have Mark Williams Cook. He has over 20 years of SEO experience and is the co-owner of search agency Candor, the founder of Also Asked, and runs a pet category e-commerce business. Outside of speaking at conferences, Mark has trained over 7,000 SEOs with his Udemy course and runs the Core Updates SEO newsletter. I want to give a warm welcome to our wonderful panelists. I'm just going to kick us off with a nice, easy audience submitted question, which is SEO finally dead? And, I'll append that to say, if you were to start a new website or a new domain, is it worth it? How, would you get any meaningful amount of traffic from Google? So with that in mind, Ryan, I'll pass the mic over to you.
Yeah, this is such a great question. I'm asked this maybe every day from my readers and customers. So, my version of the answer is always going to be skewed by my life experiences and what I've done in the SEO world. So, to me, SEO is not dead. It's been dead once or twice a year, every year for the last 20 years, but it is changing in ways that I think it hasn't changed before. And I know we're going to talk all about that today, but from where I sit, what I see is SEO is now just kind of evolving into the next version of working with AI. And, we're seeing a lot more, say, zero-click searches being done, but I'd argue that that wasn't traffic that you'd really meaningfully build a business on anyway. And so the stuff where you're going to build real relationships with people, you're going to educate, you're going to teach an in-depth process, that's the kind of stuff that people will still click through to a website where there's someone who has expertise and authority and trust. So from my perspective, kind of a new version of the fear cycle that's going around, and we will see where it lands. But I think something like video has become much more important as a result of the changes we're seeing.
Totally. Anything else to add, Marie?
Sure. I'll say what I always say to this question is as long as there are businesses that need to be found, then there's a need for SEO. Whether the searches are coming from traditional Google results or from AI tools, businesses still need to know how to get found. And it's actually an exciting time because none of us really know what the landscape's going to look like in terms of AI, which means there's all sorts of opportunity for new expertise to be born. I do have concern for sites that existed because you figured out loopholes or figured out how to manipulate search engines. I think that SEO is dead for some types of content websites that really weren't original or unique. But for legitimate businesses that have legitimate customers, there's more than ever a big need there.
Mark, Jeannie, anything to add?
I would say yes, it's alive. It's more exciting than ever. I think if somebody's adaptive and loves learning and just jumps in, it's okay to fail forward. That's often how we learn and land on real unique successes.
I think we'll actually be doing more kind of SEO type stuff for robots, which may sound weird, but I think what we're going to eventually see is people outsourcing some more of their decisions to AI. So an AI understands your preferences, what brands you might like to buy from, and it will help make those recommendations for you. So I think because it's an easier thing to do, it's less effort, and ultimately people are lazy. And if you look at any technology, they grow in spaces where they're reducing friction. So I think it's still going to be important to have a strategy to optimize yourself for agents that are helping people make decisions, as opposed to just optimizing for a page where humans are making decisions.
Yeah, I think that that is actually a really good topic to then segue into, which is some people call it AEO, it's artificial intelligence engine optimization. I think my favorite is probably GEO, generative, engine optimization. I think some people call it LLMO, or LLM optimization. But what are some going theories that you have to be able to convince large language models that your brand, your product, your clients' brands and products are, worthy of being mentioned by large language models within the topics that, they want to show up in. Marie, I think this one is a good
Sure.
one for you
Yeah.
to kick
Yeah.
us off with.
I did an interview with it's funny my kids are laughing because like the last authoritative place you would expect me to be is Vogue, but I did an interview with Vogue and they were talking about how Gen Z is getting their skincare advice from ChatGPT, and so they were asking me how do skincare brands get more recognized, like get more recommended by ChatGPT. So I did a bunch of searches for them, and every time it was authoritative, well-known brands, which is it's difficult. If you're a brand new skincare company, you're not going to get recommended by language models. So what I really think is the most important, and maybe I'm biased because I've spent so many years studying this, is EEAT. Is that ChatGPT has, and Gemini and all these language models have a knowledge of what the world thinks. And so when I asked for a recommendation for pizza near me, and it basically gave me results based on what the reputation of these pizza places were. So a lot of being recognized in language models is going to come down to PR sometimes, and just building a reputation of being known for your topics. Which is a difficult thing to SEO. There was a day where we could take like any business and a really good knowledge of SEO, maybe knowing where to get links or where to buy links sometimes could actually propel businesses to the top. But today it's more and more about being legitimately the go-to source for people.
Mark, anything to add?
Yeah, I think we can split the question in two in terms of how to surface yourself within LLM models, like when they're pre-baked. There was a paper out this year, it was either June or July, called Generative Engine Optimization, which was quite interesting, which showed that the content most likely to be surfaced included statistics and citations, even if they weren't real. And I think that's obviously an artifact of how the how the token probability is taking place, i.e., this is the shape of good content, and maybe there's feedback loops because people are easily tricked into thinking, oh, this is actually a great answer because it looks good. So I think there's that. I don't think that particularly has a future in SEO because there's so many limitations to those models. I think we'll see more stuff happening like we've got with ChatGPT, using Bing's index, Google obviously have their own index, and all of those things working together. And I won't just repeat what Marie said, but I think that's going to be more about
digital PR and getting mentioned more. Again, to cite actual studies that have been done, a lot of the stuff we're seeing get surfaced in like AOs now. There's a big overlap with things that are ranking, with brands that are ranking anyway. So I don't think at the moment there's anything terribly different you need to be doing. Looking to the future, I would put money on the people that are going to win that are the companies that also have like hardware share. So Google owning Android, Apple, I think, because there's huge amounts of user data they can plug into those models that people like OpenAI and Microsoft to an extent don't have at the moment.
Bernard, can I add, I thought of something that would probably be helpful here.
Of course.
One thing that you can do if you're trying to work with a brand and trying to get it recognized in language models is start asking questions about the brand. So talk to ChatGPT, talk especially to Gemini, because even though it feels like Gemini is behind ChatGPT, like Google's not going away. So it's going to be used more and more. And say, you know, what brands can you recommend for this? And if they don't mention your client or your company, then say, why didn't you mention my company? What can they do so that you're more likely to mention them? And often it'll say, you know, get more well-known, get more reviews, go on podcasts, things like this, you know? And so sometimes the language models will tell you or give you some hints as to what you need to do in order to get recognized.
I think that that's super fascinating, and what, my follow-up question was going to be, right? I feel like there has been a very big emphasis both on Google PR side and, studies being done within the SEO industry that allude to the idea that brand mentions and brand itself is such a big consideration in how Google and language models are perceiving websites and domains. That said, I think one of the ramifications that we've had is that small publishers have been being, given the short end of the stick. And so my question then is, let's say we are a small publisher or a small brand, what are some additional ideas, right? Marie mentioned the whole conversation with Gemini on how do I, be more of a brand, but what are some things that you've seen or observed in terms of brand? And, how do you think Google and language models are actually, thinking about brand authority or brand metrics associated with, every brand? Ryan, I'll pass the mic to you.
I think this one is actually so incredibly simple, yet our human brains love to overcomplicate it. So to me, this comes down to do genuinely interesting things online.
Yes.
And that can look like videos that, maybe go viral, whatever, but just showing up regularly in some sort of medium where you're leaning into your strengths and something that you find actually fun. Like if you show up and you're having fun creating content, helping real people, spreading the word about it. As Marie said, doing podcast interviews is a huge way to do this because you're going to increase your mentions around the web. And by just showing up and putting out genuinely useful content, working hard to distribute it and get it in different places online, that's also going to create more opportunities for you where maybe one day you will get reached out to be interviewed for Vogue or to have a column on, Forbes or something. Forbes being maybe not the best example these days, but I think that's a really this is so simple at the end of the day. And there aren't really shortcuts to this kind of stuff. It's showing up, doing good work for people, making stuff that's honestly really helpful. And if you can find that balance of educating and entertaining people, then show up, do that consistently 100 times, 500 times, 1,000 times over the course of years. You can't be ignored, really. And so I think the answer is you got to do the fundamentals. You can't skip that stuff. I think all these changes are seeking to eradicate the manipulation, right? That's the constant thing that algorithms are trying to weed out is people who are gaming the system. So I think doing the fundamentals will always serve you.
Jeannie, Marie, Mark, anything to add here?
I would add getting very niche, especially if you're starting out, if you're broad, It's better to really be recognized for a topic or a certain field of medicine or whatever it might be, and write comprehensively, but very tailored to that article. And rather than an article that kind of repeats a broad scope of several things, really getting that topic hub aligned. I think today, if we can catch, even a new business can, on multi-search with Google, whether that's, adding. I've had people call me and say, I just got my new iPhone and what is this? What happened here? I touched this, and they had gone into Google Lens and they didn't even know what it was. And they're like, how can you get my business here? So I think multi-channel, multimodal, multi search, really getting expansive, taking in not just Google, but Bing search, being on the channels active where your audience is. It just takes a broader reach that's at the same time very niche.
Let me respond to David's comment here. So David said that most of the tips that AI models tell him to do are just generic stuff. And so what I do when I get a generic answer is challenge the model and say, like, well, that's just something everybody knows. Here's a prompt that I really like to use. I'll say, give me 10 ideas that you think nobody's ever thought of before, which some people will tell you language models can't do that, but they can put connections together. And then I'll say, then critique those ideas and give me even better ones until we find something that I really think is valuable. So I've found it really, really helpful. Like I don't use ChatGPT and Gemini to like provide my SEO strategy, but it's like I have a brainstorming partner next to me all the time. So if I'm like, how do I want to get more found? Then I have a brainstorming conversation. And then even more, you can go from there, have a conversation in ChatGPT. I like to do it in the new O1 model if you have the paid version. And then copy that conversation, put it into Notebook LM, which is Google's product, and get the Notebook LM podcasters to make a podcast directed just at you to help you generate new ideas. And then go out for a walk and listen to the podcasters. And it's pretty wild how like they might not come up with anything revolutionary, but it gets your brain thinking just as if you had somebody smart sitting next to you.
I've got something super specific I want to add, but I just want to reply to Mike Generoso in the comments. He says, cool, but I can't really imagine a local cleaning company doing something fun or viral worthy. I'll put a link in the chat. There's a local Watford-based cleaner in the news literally 3 days ago. I saw this, who went viral because he took videos of the grime on the London Underground and got coverage in BBC News, Daily Mail, Metro. So I think there is always something you can do. But I wanted to specifically mention, we were talking about specific metrics Google uses to look at brand. What do we think they're doing and how can we impact that? So the Google exploit that I spoke about this year that we reported in March had a specific metric Google was using called site quality, which we had for 800,000 different sites, which was on a scale of 0 to 1. And something really fascinating to me about that was we found any site that had a site quality score below 0.4 in Google had no kind of rich result, featured snippet, anything like that. The same as we're seeing now, people are talking about being shadow banned from kind of AI overviews. They're not appearing in there. There's a specific patent Google filed in 2016 called site quality. It's literally called the name of the metric. And to put it very quickly, what the site quality patent was looking at was essentially how many times your, I'm going to say brand, but it means kind of name of entity, company, whatever you want to call it, but how many times your brand was searched for alongside other search terms, how many times that brand name appears in anchor text alongside those keywords, and specifically how many times people appear to specifically select you in the SERPs, i.e. you are doing something that Google's click model does not predict. And there's ways that you can impact that on any size of site, such as get out of the 1990s kind of thinking of, oh, we're advertising our website and you're doing some other type of marketing and you're like, we're at www.alsoask.com. Tell your users what you want them to do. If you're making a video, like Ryan said, say, hey, search for also asked, and then the name of the article you've written. So you're giving people the behavior, which they're probably like more likely to do anyway than typing in the web address. And then that's showing Google that people are searching for you. Even if it's something you didn't rank first for, they're more likely to select you. And that's a specific metric I've seen Google score sites on. It has real world impacts on the search results. And there's patents that likely have changed over the last 8 years, but it gives a very good steer at the kind of thing they're looking at.
Fantastic. Yeah, I do want to now move on to a audience question from Rhiannon. And I think this is, discussing a lot of the recent helpful content core updates that have happened as we've seen on X, LinkedIn. I mean, of course, the majority of sites that do get shared have had a lot of negative turbulence associated with them, right? We're seeing drops as much as 50% all the way to 99% or 100%. And so the question is, Google says it prioritizes helpful people-first content. Our website has been producing intentional quality content for years, and we're an established brand in our industry, but our organic traffic has dropped, whether that's due to helpful updates, core updates, so on and so forth. So my question is, have any of you seen any significant recoveries? I think there has been some that have recovered by 20%, but dropping by 80% and then recovering by 20% is still, a long way to go. So any sites that you've noticed that have seen more recovery than others? And if so, what are your advices to, our audience on how to set your content and your website up for success in this world that we live in? Jeannie, I'm gonna pass the mic over to you.
Well, I'm going to say I am fortunate. I can say we have sites I have two in particular that have significant gains. And so because I do use Notebook LM, Kaggle, mostly Google Vertex AI, I think a lot of what I needed to do was make sure that my grounding data was really solid and that I really gave my AI agent steps. And so they could give me output that's very useful for what we were doing for next content, refreshing content, image captioning. And so we've heard it so many times that what you start with for, your SEO analysis, schema audits, competitive analysis, you really have to start with solid data. I find a Notebook LM is fantastic, but it doesn't give me the same ability to go in and take my data sets, from that are unique to a client, unique to engagement on that client, pulling in the Google Search Console data for that client. And so it's not pulling as much from broad ideas or maybe the same information that, is just producing again in a new format what's already out on the web, but I'm giving it very specific step-by-step guidelines, and I'm using that client data, and that really is helping.
Any other observations?
I have
Yes.
lots of thoughts on this. I don't want to dominate the whole talk, but this is probably a good question for me. So I've reviewed, not paid for reviewed, but just trying to understand the helpful content system, hundreds of sites that have been impacted. And yes, I have seen some recoveries. So I had one person reach out to me who is not a client, but a newsletter subscriber. And I looked him up in Ahrefs, and I could not believe that he went well beyond his terrible, he was devastated by helpful content in September, and then did really, really well. That site completely redid their site, brand new redesign, added buying guides, added unique videos that really helped the people get to what they wanted to get to. It was a complete redo of this site. Now, let's talk about sites that were impacted. And it's so hard because there's a video that's going around in the last couple of days. I'm not going to mention the site, but with a woman whose site was impacted by the helpful content system. And she said it's really hard when people start talking about it because people, just like me, will say, well, here's why it's not helpful. But I think it really, really helps to look at this. This woman's site, I looked at it and it had some really helpful stuff. However, in order for me to get to the helpful part, the page that I looked at, I had to go through 12 scrolls of just fluff, just like, what is this topic? How do you purchase supplies for this topic? Before I actually got to the part that answered my question, and ads and whatnot. So if you were impacted, what you need to do is really think of the intent. The person who lands on this page, what is their purpose for landing on a page? And then look at what other options they have. And a lot of the time, the sites that were impacted were ranking against like giants where if I had the choice of this no-name website versus this well-known brand, I'm always going to click on the well-known brand probably. And so the helpful content, I thoroughly believe, is all about user metrics, not just straight click-through rate, but Google can see a number of signals that show whether people stayed on your site, whether they got their answer satisfied by another site, whether they come back to your site. Many recipe sites were hit, and I think Google could probably tell which recipes people make, and which recipes people bookmark and come back to. So it really is about comparing your content to what is still ranking, but it's very hard to do that when it's your own site. So what I would say is look at how far people have to search to get to the part that they're looking for, and how well structured your content is. Like, do you make them read through paragraphs and paragraphs to find that one little piece that they came to your site for? And maybe that'll help some people.
I like what you said about it being tied to user metrics as well, because I think the way it's been presented as helpful content, a lot of the focus is primarily on content. And to that, I would say currently LinkedIn ranks for 90,000 loans keywords in the US. And all of these articles are Pulse articles. They are all 100% AI written. There's people that have published like 200 articles about every type of payday loan you can get within 24 hours. It's like the worst content you could possibly have, and it ranks. Like there's loads of number one rankings. So to me, to say, if anyone's like, it's just about content, that to me is a perfect example of it absolutely isn't. LinkedIn, obviously, as a site, has huge amounts of positive user metrics of people going there, staying there, using the site. And because the vast majority of the site is that super happy user, I think Google's created themselves this situation where big sites are able to exploit their rankings. It's the same problem they're having now with they are trying to combat this site reputation abuse, they call it, where you've got big sites that are just having any old affiliate coupons on their site, and they still haven't, as far as I'm aware, rolled anything out algorithmically, because the comment from Google was, we want to do it carefully, which to me says we haven't found a way to do this without accidentally completely nuking maybe some big sites which people would notice and would be very, very bad for us. So I still think there's a way to go. So I'm really interested if anything does happen with this core update that's happening right now.
I'll add one quick thing here. I've seen really solid upticks in traffic in the aftermath of algorithm updates where we do a serious audit, especially if my site is hit or a site that I'm working with is hit, then that's kind of a reason to have a coming to Jesus moment, okay? It's not necessarily a sign that you're doing everything wrong, but what I find really helps is to look at URLs that maybe haven't gotten much traffic in a couple of years. And if those topics don't support being an authority in your particular niche, if they're kind of outside of what your like best main area of focus is, then I would consider dropping some of those older URLs that don't get traffic and you maybe don't want to update and make genuinely great posts. So I think coming up with that balance of, hey, here's the list of URLs that need to either be dropped or meaningfully, substantially updated, potentially rewritten, is a really good activity to go through. And I've seen sites like bounce 40 to 60% gains in traffic by, if you have 1,000 articles on your site, that's eating up a lot of crawl budget from Google. And so maybe axing that in half or taking a third off. I don't know, like this is up to you and to talk with people who know your space better, but really meaningfully chopping some of that stuff down that doesn't really serve you and maybe eats up crawl budget from Google, confuses the search engines about who you are and what you do and what you're an expert at. That's really like fruitful territory to spend some time in.
Definitely. Let's talk about AI. Lots of people actually want to learn about AI-driven SEO tactics. And I think a very common question that we get and opinion that's circulating in the market is this idea of AI detection, right? AI content detection. So a question then from the audience is, well, I'm going to add on an additional one, but Neil asks three-part question. I'll add on an additional. Number one is, do you think Google cares that content is AI generated? Then the follow-up is, does AI content detection as a, industry or tool set make any amount of sense? And then, there's a variety of other things to go from there. But I figured I would ask those two. Number one, do you think Google actually cares if content is AI generated? And number two, what are your thoughts and feelings around AI generated content detection? Marie? I'll
So
kick it off
Google
with you.
doesn't care. They have a whole guidance on AI generated content and what's acceptable, what's not acceptable. They care about whether it's helpful and satisfying to people. With that said, it's very hard to write a completely AI written article and be original, unique, and the type of thing that your readers go, wow, this is amazing. Okay. So personally, when I'm writing, I'll use AI to help me finish my thoughts, to help me organize things, to help me figure out what heading structure to use, things like that. When I first started using ChatGPT to like experiment with writing stuff, I rewrote some of my blog posts and I look back at it now and go, oh my gosh, it's horrible. Like it's so obviously not me that wrote it. It was so obviously AI. And so I really caution people against like just solely using AI to write things. So Google, I don't think that Google uses an AI detector. I think that they have all these signals that determine whether users have been satisfied, what type of content satisfies people, and how it's written. I think it's no different than if I had an assistant or an employee write a first draft for me. I can have AI write a first draft for me, but it really matters to people, I think, that you're reading something that a human wrote.
Mark, Ryan, any additional thoughts here?
I always have. Do you want to go first, Ryan?
I'll add a quick one on this one. So I actually think the AI content detection industry is pretty schemy, if you ask me, because it's preying on people's fears. It kind of preys on people's emotions, in my opinion, right? People can feel differently about it. That's okay. But from my perspective, it doesn't really matter as long as what Marie said, you're actually delivering real value to people and they're spending time on your content and doing things with it as a result of consuming it. And it doesn't really matter how you get there as long as it's genuinely helping people. And, if it sounds like it's you, if it feels like it's you, you're doing the right things, no matter how you arrive at the end result.
I think the tools can be a little bit useful, maybe as one cornerstone if you're working maybe with external writers, just as a quick check for has this just been churned out by ChatGPT, and do I need to look at it further? There's certainly loads of false positives. They're not that reliable. One thing I found super interesting was going back to the like site quality stuff, how Google was measuring that for sites obviously that are new and do not have any user metrics. Obviously, Google still needs a way to figure out if they're good. They actually have another patent called estimating site quality, which explains they take known scores from websites that they know this is like a 0.9, this is a 0.8, etc. And they build what's called a phrase model to predict the site quality of a new site. And what I personally found fascinating is I think AI content broke that quick check Google used to do, because to produce lots of spam content, we'd have to do stuff like Markov chains or spinning, things like that, which statistically they stood out in terms of how the content read. Because of the way LLMs generate content, I think, and the training data, they naturally kind of match this phrase model, which I believe is why when Google rolled out stuff like BERT and all of these improvements to better understand the queries, we had a whole second renaissance in niche blogging, right? Everyone was finding, oh, hey, I can just start a blog and I write about any kind of long tail thing and I'm ranking. And I think that's because we kind of skipped a lot of those checks and balances that Google had. I did a talk in 2022 at Brighton SEO where I gave examples of half a dozen sites that went from 0 to 1 million visitors in like 12 weeks, just from mass producing content and Google kind of waving them in, which is, I think, part of what we now see in the HCU. Google's trying to figure out a way to work out, is this site worthy to rank, apart from just looking at how, kind of getting a litmus test of the content. So yeah, there's some artifacts that come from generating AI content, which are not good, but it's not, as Marie and Ryan said, it's not the AI itself. Google cares about things that cost them money, basically, and this doesn't.
Jeannie, there's a specific question for you that's an add-on to, this discussion that we're having. So Ben asks, are there AI-assisted trends to be aware of or concerned about due to the potential danger of misinformation, more specifically because you focus a lot on in the healthcare space?
Yes, I think that's a super question. I think I don't know why I like challenges, but I do think the YMYL, or financial and healthcare, do have additional scrutiny. I think in healthcare, where somebody's life or quality of life may depend on what they read, that there's less room for error. I would call it a little room to air space. And so adding in factual content that's well sourced to a document, doing tabular data. I add tables, understanding what is going to seem like it's more than just opinion. Because when somebody's searching for a healthcare answer, it's great to have opinion, but if it's anchored in fact, that will help it. I have noticed in conversations that I've been invited into, both with the White House and FTC, to shape going forward AI policies for customers, that there's a lot of concern that we're really sourcing the right places. So, for example, when I'm grounding my data in an AI agent, I will upload patents. I will upload PDFs that are very specific and have factual data, and ask, put out my prompts, do a step-by-step prompt, so that I can say, are there any errors in what I'm saying here? Does this align with trusted sources, my opinion? How can I improve on the flow of this so it's more consumable to the person on it? And I have learned or found that the National Institute of Health is considered the standard of truth. So if a site has a lot of articles, I had one like this, they wanted to kind of introduce a whole new concept of healthcare in a certain area. And it was very hard to get it to rank because it went against the grain of accepted opinion in the respected niche. So that's where we sourced NIH, where it talked specifically about it, And we're able to then add opinion to fact and improve on the healthcare articles and getting them ranked higher.
I just want to add something into what Jeannie said there, because that is such brilliant advice. In the again, going back to stuff we saw in the Google exploit, there was details about them calculating consensus for documents they were finding, and they were literally giving a consensus score based on the number of paragraphs that agree or disagree with the general consensus. And there's also query classifiers, really obvious ones, such as is debunking query. So if you type something like, is the world flat? That's classed as a debunking query, and you'll see the stuff that ranks is only things that is heavily in agreement with the consensus. And I think it's a really good shout that the same is going to apply, maybe not quite as severely, but certainly to YMYL kind of medical queries. Like, we work with clients in like the drug rehab space, and one thing we do is, if there is anything they want to talk about that's treatment wise, that's not kind of, scientifically proven or tested or accepted, that content goes separately and sits somewhere else away from the stuff that we actually want to rank for the core YMWL terms. I think it's really, really good advice from Jeannie there.
Awesome. We got a lot of audience questions. I typically, in the last 10 minutes, go, okay, it's time for rapid fire, but I'm going to get into rapid fire now so that we can get through all of these questions. What this means for our panelists is that I'm just going to go ahead, read the question, ask one of you to go ahead and answer. And then if, anybody else has any, rapid thoughts after that, then feel free to chime in, or else I'm just going to go and assign out to the questions to our wonderful influencers. So I'm going to kick us off with a question from Mikey. Mikey asks, what did you guys study in college and how did you get into SEO? I studied political science and now I am in marketing. I will hand this to Dr. Marie Haynes because I know you have a very interesting story here.
I was a veterinarian and I loved my job. I was a very good surgeon. I really, really loved what I did. And then I was on bed rest during a pregnancy and just kind of interested in SEO around the time that Google's Penguin algorithm came out. And so it was another diagnostic puzzle for me to figure out. And then people started wanting to pay me for my thoughts. And then it just kind of exploded from there. So yeah, you can take any career, and SEO is the type of thing that you can just, if you have a passion to learn and to share, then you can have success with it.
Awesome. Next up, we have Chris, who asks, do you see AI-powered features such as AI overviews eventually replacing all question-based search results? Who, what, when, where, why, how, as answered will be presented in the above the fold real estate instead of scrolling and clicking into individual websites? Ryan.
I think my answer for this is probably. I don't think I'm as well deep into the research as say Mark and Marie and Jeannie are on this topic, but where I see it going is, hell yeah, they want to keep you on Google answering quick questions for you. So I think where you have the opportunity to stand out most and where you want to compete anyway is on teaching more meaningful stuff to people rather than quick Q&A, because at the end of the day, expertise, authority, trust, this stuff is built much more on building real relationships with people by exchanging real meaningful value that touches their lives somehow, rather than answering a quick question for them. So I don't even think it's the arena to care about playing in personally.
Awesome. Next up, we have another question from Mikey. They ask, what's really going to move the needle for a local business in terms of SEO strategy? Mark, would you like to take this one? If not, it's okay.
Not really, but I'll
Okay.
give it a stab. So, I mean, for me, it was like the example I gave earlier and what Ryan said, which is that regardless of your industry, you can do interesting things. This is going to be the differentiator. I have done digital PR campaigns for a company that recycles cardboard boxes. It's doable. And I think certainly, as the last question suggested, we're going to see more things surfaced by AI. We're going to see more of these this work that's done by humans outsourced to AI. So I think increasing your footprint there is important. So yeah, I know it's a really vague answer, but it's a vague question with local business, but it's about being interesting and maybe being niche, like Jeannie said.
Awesome.
I might just tag on that and say, I find that Google Local Ads, Maps marketing, offers that are uploaded right in your Google Business listing are really powerful for local businesses. And that's really the intent of the whole Maps platform. It's crazy how much Maps marketing can drive business to a local entity.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Jeannie, this next one is specifically for you. Pam asks, this is all great advice, but how does a small B2B company with a 1.5 person in-house content team and no agency support manage all of these things that we've been talking about, brand, PR, building quality content, meeting searcher needs? What are the highest priorities and most important levers to focus on? What do you think?
Wow. Well, actually, I've helped a couple of agencies do that I'm just shocked at what they can accomplish with a small team. But it takes being very strategic. I think partnerships are just fabulous. I really enjoy listening to what each person here is saying. And I would encourage people to follow up with somebody who can help you get strategic. I always start with content, it seems, because once you have some quality, helpful content, there's a lot you can do with it. You can add paid marketing, you can push it out on social, you can do a PR around it. But getting something that says who you are, I would say that's establishing your entity home and getting a Google Knowledge panel so that which can come off of just the basics of a really clear definition. Who are you? What do you do? What do you do best? How can you help people? That should be so clear on your entity home or homepage that then the search engines know what to send searches to you for.
Yeah, definitely. I'm going through and reading all these questions and trying to make sense of some of them before I ask them. So the next one, Ben asks, the panel seems to agree that EEAT will only grow more important in the future. That said, any opinions on whether or not this makes more of a case for subject matter experts being more directly involved in authoritative optimized content? Or could the opposite be true, where we need more generalists, SEO talent writers who can bridge the gap between product brand insiders and audiences they may not have the skills and time to reach and connect with? So, I'm trying to figure out what this question is actually saying.
I think I know, Bernard, that
Okay.
because I get asked this a lot, and we went through the years of author bios, and I had one very well publicized case of a site in 2018 that hired a bunch of doctors, and then in another core update they saw big improvements, and then we had all these crazy like, oh, do I need to have my name attached to a doctor's name attached to, I'm talking about medical content. I really think today that EEAT is so multifaceted. It is, are you qualified to produce the content that you're producing? So if, let's take the medical example, it doesn't make sense. It's not like most medical doctors don't have the time to sit down and write content, but if you are a website that is known for your medical content, then that's acceptable. But the thing is, a lot of these websites that are writing on professional topics, I see often that the SEO is writing the content, which doesn't, the SEO can guide the content production, but somebody with expertise needs to be involved. So you're not going to get a black and white answer to this. It's not like Google has a switch that's like, yes, you have EEAT and no, you don't. It's more, do people see you as qualified to write this content? And is this content, at the level that people would expect for, especially for YMYL. So EEAT is so hard to talk about because there's no specific things you can do. You can get more well-known for your topics, and you can publish expert level stuff to help improve your EEAT. But you're never going to see a case study of like, well, at least I don't think so, of like, we did this one specific thing and now our EEAT switch is on. It's very difficult.
I just
Thanks for
very quickly add there. I mean, we've got a process now where we are speaking directly to clients, their teams, and just recording video interviews for content to then feed into AI to help us structure, because they're not a good person to try and sit there and write an article, even if we give them a good brief. So we actually send people now to interview them, film it. We sometimes get really nice social media clips from there, but then we can say to AI, put this into this kind of format and then review it, kind of make sure the on page is done. And that's a really good way to get insights out that sometimes we wouldn't have. And you can build that into one big knowledge center for that company. And you're not relying on the AI to like write the content. So you're still getting all the nice, as Amanda mentioned at the beginning, information gain stuff, the opinions, that kind of stuff about product services.
Fantastic. This next one is for you, Mark, and comes from Chris. How much does an overall website's health, rankings, and traffic matter to the ranking of an individual service page? For example, if I have a marketing agency website and I'm working on updating my SEO service page, how would this page suffer once updated by the rest of the website not being as optimized? Sorry, that ending didn't quite make that much sense, but perhaps to say it differently, how important is topical authority? Do you think that it's a factor or a myth? And how would you architect ranking an SEO service page in relation to other kinds of written long form content that you might go
Sure. So I have an unpopular opinion on topical authority, which is that it might help a bit once you've crossed we've won 5 other races. Again, example I would give you currently, I think the Vatican website is ranking for CBD gummies. I don't know what topical authority the Vatican has on CBD
I hope they have a
gummies,
good
but
affiliate link in there.
yeah, but Google's ranking that on the first page. So again, if anyone's like topical authority is, really important, you need to be seen as a topical authority. Exhibit 1 just today is the Vatican, or I saw that, the Harvard blog several months ago ranking for like VPN providers. So I think there's lots of different things that come into play and affect each other. If we're talking about health as in kind of some kind of SaaS score that, has been given to your site because it's got some broken links and stuff. Generally, I wouldn't care about that kind of stuff. Of course, there are things you can do like internal linking and, making sure that page is clearly marked up that can help it rank. But in general, you can tell from the kind of things you see ranking that have got very poor health. I wouldn't lose too much sleep over it. The way I'd approach it is do what's good for your business in the best SEO way possible, not do SEO things kind of for your business that way around.
Awesome answer. Next up, we have a question from Ankit. This is going to be for you, Ryan. So, do website platforms still matter today? I've seen Wix, Squarespace sites that are SEO friendly, but the community suggests WordPress over, Wix and Squarespace for B2B. Does it matter? CMS platforms.
I think it matters less than it used to would be my answer. But for me personally, I just know how to use WordPress really well. And I think from a technical perspective, WordPress does do a really good job and has an ecosystem of tools that are like so long standing with good SEO best practices. Like free Yoast SEO plugin is still really directionally helpful to me. And so I tend to say like WordPress is still what I recommend to most people who aren't afraid of spending a little bit of time with designing the look, the layout, the feel of your site. But from my perspective, I tend to think that anyone who's creating genuinely great content and showing up regularly, consistently for months and years on end because they love what they're doing and they're motivated by it, you can do that from any platform for the most part, as long as you're nailing your fundamental SEO best practices. And I think a Squarespace probably does that really well from some sort of like, hey, I don't want to spend a ton of time with building out the look and feel of a website perspective. I would say, like, if you want something visual builder in that lane, go with a Squarespace over a Wix. I think Squarespace is just a little more forward thinking on what they're doing from a technical perspective. But I mean, I still love SEO on WordPress personally.
All right, final rapid fire question, and then we'll move on to just overarching thoughts for our audience in terms of SEO in 2025 and in the future. So just know that that question is coming. What are one or two, high-level idea strategies that you want to impart upon everybody here in terms of how they should think about SEO in this, new ecosystem, new world that we are moving into. Last question before we jump into that. Haley asks, and Jeannie, this is for you. How will AI change the metrics used to measure SEO for success? And how do we talk to stakeholders about this change that we see happening as Google and ChatGPT work hard to keep people on the SERP, not clicking through to websites? It's going to be harder and harder to drive traffic and potentially leads and conversions. How do you navigate that with clients on your side?
I think a lot of it comes down to strategy. You can have a great platform, you can have a great set of tools, but your strategy and how you use that to align with business goals. So, of course, everybody says, well, give me more patients, give me more customers, give me more buyers. And so increasing revenue. So with the AI component, what I'm doing is talking about cost savings, because I think if you're very efficient with using multi-modules and Notebook LM or ChatGPT, you should be able to come up with where you're saving time. So talk about cost savings, efficiency savings, and the ways that you're using it to improve user experience. Those are all things which I'm doing is keeping data logs. I'm very much a data person when it comes to proving what I'm doing, being effective. And so I can show pre and post AI use, the difference in what I'm gaining for them.
Awesome. All right. Well, final thoughts and high-level strategies that you would like to share with our wonderful audience. Marie, what do you got? What do you think people ought to focus on with their SEO moving forward?
I would say pay as much attention as you can to AI. Sundar Pichai said a couple of earnings calls ago that SGE at the time, which is now AI Overviews, is the future. And Google will continue to change just bit by bit. You're going to see more and more people using Gemini. Gemini is going to get more and more prevalent on your phones. If you have a Pixel phone, you're already starting to see Google just, integrating Gemini into a few things. And Circle to Search is something that is new, and Google Lens is something that's new. And I don't think it'll be long before we see the resurgence of glasses, and they'll be way better than Google Glass was years ago. And this is the way that things are headed. And just to make things, this is not going to be next year, but eventually we will not even be needing keyboards. Meta has a patent for a device on your wrist that you just think about typing, and it will take your neural signals and convert that into typing. And so even, and then we can talk about brain implants. We're soon going to have this world of search that will laugh at how we'll get nostalgia over how we used what we're doing now with a screen and a keyboard. So what I would say is, I think we can't even imagine the way that AI is going to change how we get information online. So I would just say, don't be afraid to use the language models. They're going to make mistakes right now, and they're not perfect, but the people who know how to communicate with them are going to end up being some of the most valuable people in society. So I'd leave you with that. Just keep trying and testing and enjoying using the AI tools.
Fantastic. Ryan, what do you got?
I'll give two specific things that have worked really well for me this year. And I've seen about a 20-ish% increase in organic traffic from SEO this year. So about 500,000 monthly readers to just my blog as my main property. tool SEO is number one. So I dropped the link in the chat, ryrob.com/tools, if you want to see like the living example of what I'm talking about here, but creating free tools that my audience can benefit from and like really giving them something to engage with has really significantly boosted my traffic. And then number two, quick one, adopt a video first creation process. This has like really crushed it for me. Making videos used to be so like mentally, psychologically difficult for me. And doing the hard part, making a pretty good few-minute video, and then using AI to help with the first draft of an SEO optimized blog post in my own words from the video I made has really like helped me save a lot of time, and also paired it with this medium video, which I think is way more defensible and way better way to build relationships with an audience. And there may be a day when AI is as good as we are on video, but I think that's much further off than, say, just text-based content.
Awesome. Love hearing how, gotta keep evolving and changing and, whatever mediums that are more trustworthy and hard to, commoditized are, becoming the authentic, genuine thing. Mark, what would you love to leave our audience with?
We mentioned earlier, I think it was Ryan saying there's that long standing trend of Google wanting to keep people on the SERP because essentially that's the easiest way for them to make money. Marie mentioned we're going to see more AI overviews. I think they just announced they're 90% cheaper to generate now in their Q3 call. So definitely going to happen. So we know those things are basically going to happen. So from a strategic level, my thoughts on content would be thinking about dividing up knowledge into what I would group as solved and unsolved knowledge spaces. So I would define a solved knowledge space as, how many more beef lasagna recipes do we need on the internet, or have we kind of got that covered now as a species? Because I think that's a very common, especially for SME approach to content creation, which is they just car cash straight into these really kind of mid topics that have been done because they see other people doing it. And that's not where the future is. That's where Google's going to decide now to 180 it, and I'm keeping the visitors there and I'm going to monetize them how I like. So focus on unsolved areas. So specifically, maybe things that change quite quickly, where there's lots of intent shift. Absolutely agree with Ryan on videos. The kind of how I mentioned earlier, like a really good way to do that. Two sleepers for me, Marie mentioned them because Marie seems to mention everything very quickly, is Google Discover. I hardly hear Google talk about it that much. And the last data I saw, I think, was 2018, where they said they had 800 million active users on it. I use Google Discover a lot now. I noticed this week they integrated the lens search into my Discover page. So something, especially if I'm in ecom and we know Google's having AI organized pages now, would be more media stuff as well, away from text. So images, to try and get, I think we're going to see an increase in camera searches, image searches. So not just reeling out stock photography or product manufacturer photography as well. Are going to be areas that are going to grow and are safer because they're harder for Google to create at scale and monetize, which of course they'll do. So don't get in the way of Google making money because you'll lose.
I love it. The explored and unexplored information spaces is like a way to put it in a way that I haven't really heard before. And yeah, I like the point that, at the end of the day, this is Google's audience, and SEO is essentially siphoning off Google's audience, but at Google's gonna do whatever Google is best, going to do for itself. So, Jeannie, one last strategy, advice that you would like to offer before we call it a wrap? What do you got?
I would say just jump in and get excited and level up your SEO. If you're in retail, maybe you want to go. I think for the last 3 years, I've done the GS1 course or event, attended that EU conference, and it's amazing to me what you can do with leveling up your schema markup with GS1. In B2B lead generation, for example, some of my clinics that the leads are physician to physician. And that's where, I've gotten, find the skills. I've been able to get vetted by Mayo as a marketer who can add into their referral database physician to physician so they can refer out. I would have to say right now, Google's very intensive course on Gen I is fantastic. If you can start to see how search works, how they're thinking, why they've gone this way, the more as an SEO you understand why Google is going where they are, or Bing, the more you'll be empowered to take your strategies forward. So I would just say, jump in and learn. There's so much exciting opportunity and courses available.
I love it. I love that that's, the final message. I think we are at a place of great change. And with great change comes great opportunity if you're open to learning, picking up new skills. And there we have it. Thank you all again, our amazing and very knowledgeable panelists, Marie, Ryan, Mark, and Jeannie. Y'all were fantastic. And thank you, audience, for tuning in, providing a thoughtful discourse to, everything that's going on. We know things are changing quite significantly, and you heard it from Jeannie. Stay curious, go learn, and there's a lot of great and interesting things happening. Thank you all, and until next time.
And thank you.
Yes, thanks. That was great.
Thanks a lot, everyone.